The Silver Crest Estate was a monument to my power, a sprawling palace of glass and marbly perched on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. Tonight, it pulsed with the golden glow of 1,000 candles, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive champagne. It was my 35th birthday, a celebration not just of another year, but of my absolute dominion over the city's underworld. From the outside, I was Damian the Ghost Moretti, a legitimate businessman and philanthropist. Inside these walls, I was the silent king who made empires tremble. I stood on the mezzanine, a glass of Macallan 25 in my hand, my gaze sweeping over the sea of sycophantic smiles. My lieutenants, men I'd bled beside, mingled with politicians, celebrities, and the old money elite whose families I had eclipsed. It was a perfect illusion of civility, and I was its god. But as the orchestra swelled into a waltz, I felt a small, insistent tug on my pant leg. I looked down. It was the boy Luca, the son of my head housekeeper, Ria. He was Rely 3 years old, with enormous brown eyes that were usually filled with a quiet, observant wonder. Tonight, they were wide with a fear that cut through the ambient opulence. He held a single finger to his lips, a gesture of profound secrecy. I saw Ria watching from the doorway to the service corridor, her face pale and pleading. "Mr. Moretti," he whispered, his voice so soft it was almost swallowed by the music. "There are eyes in the walls. They are gonna go boom." The world narrowed. The music faded. The elegant chatter became a distant hum. In my line of work, you learn to trust the primal instincts of the innocent. They see what the corrupt overlook. I didn't ask questions. I didn't hesitate. "Luca," I said, my voice a low, calm command that was the calm before the storm. "You did so well. Listen to me. You go to your mama, and you go out to the garden. The very back. You don't look back. Understand?" He nodded, his small body trembling. I signaled to Rico, my head of security, a man whose loyalty was forged in blood and fire. His eyes met mine, and in a flash, he was moving, a ghost in his own right, sweeping Ria and Luca Tawa RD the private exit. Then, I allowed the mask of the gracious host to drop. I moved with a lethal grace, my voice a sharp, cold blade that cut through the Parudi's hum. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my smile not reaching my eyes. "A small technical emergency requires your immediate and silent evacuation to the North Lawn. You will be escorted by my security personnel. There will be no panic. You will move. Now." The first bomb detonated a minute and a half later, a muffled ROA that shook the crystal chandeliers and sent a shower of plaster raining from the ballroom ceiling. It was a beautiful, devastating symphony of chaos. But I was already outside, watching my empire burn with a cold, murderous rage. Someone had dared to touch my home, to threaten my guests, and, most unforgivably, to terrify a child who had the courage to save them all. In the chaos of shouting, fleeing guests, and the screams of my security team, I saw a flash of a familiar face. It was my fiancée, Eleanor, the daughter of a rival family, her face contorted not in fear, but in a mask of feigned terror that didn't quite hide the malevolent satisfaction glinting in her eyes. My inner circle, the men who had been with me since the beginning, gathered in the second bunker beneath the estate stables. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, and contained fury. I watched them all. Marcio, my second in command, whose face was a stone, Salvatore, the muscle, pacing like a caged tiger. And then there was Eleanor. She had insisted on being here, her hand clutching my arm in a display of feigned fragility that now made my skin crawl. The little boy, Luca, and his mother, Ria, were in an adjoining room, safe but shaken. "Damian, we have to strike back." This was the Valentinos, Salvatore ROA read, slamming his fist on the table. It was their signature, the blast pattern, the timing. "Sal, calm down," Marcio said, his voice a placid river. "We don't know that. We have to be smart. I was silent, watching. The bomb was a message, but the real attack was in the details. The traitor was in this room. The little boy didn't see bombs. He saw eyes in the walls. He saw the people who looked at the walls, the people who knew what was coming. I saw the way Eleanor's gaze flickered to a cabinet behind me, a cabinet that held the blueprints to my other safe houses. I saw the way she subtly shook her head at Salvatore, a gesture of control. I saw the ghost of a smirk on Aimé Urquo's lips. "Eleanor," I said, my voice soft. "You were so brave." "Are you all right?" "I'm just so shaken, Damian," she whispered, pressing closer to me. "Who could do this to you, to us?" Her performance was impeccable. She played the partie of the distraught fiancée to perfection, a damsel in distress in a couture gown that was now smudged with dust. But a child's whisper had opened my eyes. I remembered a moment earlier that day, when Luca had refused to let me pet his cat, a scruffy little thing he adored. He'd looked up at me with those serious eyes and said, "She smells different, Mr. Moretti. She smells SCA red." I had dismissed it as a child's fancy. Now I understood. The maid who had attended to me that morning, the one Eleanor had hired, she had been sweating, her movements jittery. I needed proof. The next morning, I told Eleanor I had a meeting with the Valentinos, a last-ditch attempt at peace. It was a lie, and she knew it, but she played along. As I left the bunker, I instructed my most loyal man, a silent operative named Enzo, to watch her. He was invisible, a whisper in the shadows. Later that day, Eleanor made her move. She slipped away from the bunker, her heels echoing in the silent servants' corridors. Enzo followed her to the old chapel on the estate's grounds. From his hidden vantage point, he saw her speaking to a man in a d'arche suit. It wasn't the Valentino. It was my chief accountant, a man named Arthur, who handled my legitimate business dealings. The chapel was a place of cold stone and cold memories. I stood in the shadows as Eleanor and Arthur concluded their treachery. Arthur handed her a small leather journal, my personal ledger of off-the-books transactions. "The feds have been given the copies," I heard Arthur say, his voice trembling. "It's enough to seize all of his accounts. The Valentinos will get their cut, just like we discussed." "And the boy," the maid, Eleanor asked, her voice devoid of the rmth she used on me. "They'll be in the Wari house by the docks tonight." "A clean, quiet solution. MARCO will ensure it," Arthur replied. I felt a cold, crystalline rage solidify in my chest. It was a betrayal so complete, so intricate, that it almost made me admire their audacity. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to erase me, to take everything I had built, and then they planned to dispose of the two people who had tried to save my life. They thought I was the dangerous one. They had no idea. I didn't confront them there. I sent Enzo to intercept the men meant for Maria and Luca. The Wari house by the docks became a tomb for 5 of Urquo's most trusted men, a message sent in blood. The news of the massacre reached the bunker, spreading a fresh wave of fear. Urquo's face turned a shade of gray I'd never seen before. He knew his mission had failed. And in that moment of his quiet terror, I saw the confirmation I needed. The traitor wasn't just Eleanor. It was the man I had trusted most. I returned to the bunker to find Eleanor, Marco, and Salvatore huddled together. The mask had slipped entirely from Eleanor's face. She was furious, her eyes blazing with a cold fire that betrayed her fully constructed composure. The news of the Wari house massacre had reached them, and panic was beginning to set in. I watched them from the doorway, these vipers I had once called family, and I felt nothing but a chilling emptiness where my heart used to be. "Marco," I said, my voice eerily calm as I stepped into the room. The 3 of them spun around, guilt written across their faces like a confession. "I have a new errand for you. I've just received a call from the Valentino's consigliera. They want to broker a meeting here tonight. They wish to discuss terms for peace." It was another lie, but one I knew they'd believe. They were arrogant, drunk on their own perceived victory, too blinded by their conspiracy to see the trap closing around them. "Are you insane, boss?" Marco sputtered, his usual placid demeanor cracking. His eyes direct to Eleanor, then back to me, searching for any sign that I knew the truth. They just try to blow you up. This is a trap. Of course it is, I said, giving him a chilling smile that didn't reach my eyes. But they want to negotiate through you. It's an odd request, I know, but a sign of their desperation. You'll go. Salvatore, you'll drive him. I'll watch from my command post, and we are a wire. I want to hear their pathetic pleas. Salvatore stepped forward, his meaty hands clenched into fists. Damian, this is suicide. Let me take a team. Let me. No, I interrupted, my voice brooking no argument. This is how it's going to be. You are my most trusted men. If anyone can handle this, it's you two. Now go. The CAR is waiting. They exchanged a glance, a silent conversation that spoke of their Shaw-red guilt and their desperate hope that they could still salvage their plan. Marco nodded slowly, his jaw tight.
Fine.
We'll go. But if anything happens... Nothing will happen, I assured them, my voice smooth as silk. I have complete faith in you. I watched them leave, Salvatore's broad shoulders hunched with tension, and Marco's hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. They were walking into the abyss, and they didn't even know it. I had to get them out of the compound. The real confrontation was here, in the bowels of my own fortress, with the woman who had smiled at me while plotting my destruction. After they left, I walked back into the main room where Eleanor was pacing, her heels clicking against the concrete floor like a countdown. She was trying to appay our calm, but I could see the cracks. The news of the Wari house had shaken her. Her fully constructed plan was unraveling, and she knew it. Damian, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. You shouldn't have sent them. The Valentinos are savages. They'll kill them. Perhaps, I said, moving closer to her. Or perhaps they'll finally learn what happens when you betray the wrong person. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear cutting through her performance. What are you talking about? I walked over to her, my hand stroking her cheek with an almost lover's tenderness. She flinched, and that tiny reaction told me everything I needed to know. You know, Ellie, I murmured, the old nickname feeling like poison on my tongue. In all my ORS, I've survived rival bosses, treacherous alliances, and more assassination attempts than I can count. But I've never been betrayed by someone I loved. The pain is exquisite. It makes the retribution so much sweeter. The shock in her eyes was a beautiful thing. It was the moment her entire world of calculated lies came crashing down. I watched her lips part, words failing her for the first time in her life. Her mask of elegance crumbled, revealing the desperate, terrified woman beneath. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, the practiced bravado gone, replaced by raw animal fear. She stepped back her hand reaching for the edge of the table to steady herself. She was trapped, the little boy, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper.
He saw you.
Not the bomb.
He saw you.
He saw your eyes on the walls. He saw your fear. He saw your anticipation. You thought you were so clever, using the Valentinos as your scapegoat, building your little alliance with Arthur and Marco. It's almost a shame to have to dismantle it. It was, after all, a work of art. I gestured, and Enzo stepped forward from the shadows, holding a tablet. On its screen was a live feed of the meeting I'd fabricated. It showed Marco and Salvatore sitting in a Wari house, an empty chair across from them, a single phone on the table. It was the sound of their own silence that was deafening. They were waiting for a meeting that would never come. They're waiting for a meeting that isn't coming, I explained, watching the color drain from Eleanor's face. While you're here, betraying me with your own words. I had a beautiful little recording set up in the chapel, Eleanor. You gave a masterful performance. I played a snippet of her conversation with Arthur, her voice cold and calculating. A clean, quiet solution. I repeated, the words dripping with contempt. You were talking about a 3-year-old boy and his mother. Eleanor's face was now a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The queen of the conspiracy, reduced to a trembling wreck before my eyes. Damian, please. You have to understand. It wasn't personal. It was business. Your empire, it's too big, it's too brutal. I knew we could split it, make it more civilized. Your way of doing things, it's obsolete. Civilized? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. The echo of my own voice in the bunker was colder than any winter wind. You're a parasite, Eleanor. You were my weakness. You were the one who tried to make me soft, to make me believe in a future that wasn't built on power and consequence. And for that, I thank you. You've given me a gift. You've reminded me that I am a ghost. I don't have a hierarchy. I don't have a family. I have a legacy. And you just tried to tear it down. I was calm, my words measured and deliberate. I wasn't shouting. I was lecturing a pupil on their final lesson. I walked to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a file. It was thick with information, months of CA refill investigation that had led me to this moment. I know about your offshore accounts, your secret APA meant in PA risks, the paintings you've stashed away, the list of your accomplices in the Valentino family. You were never in love with me, Ellie. You were in love with the idea of what my death could give you.
Tell me who the backup is.
Tell me who you'd have come after me if Marco and Salvatore had succeeded. She read at the file, her resolve crumbling like sand in an hourglass. TRS began to stream down her cheeks, but I felt no pity. These were not TRS of remorse. They were TRS of defeat, of a predator who had finally been cornered. It's no one, she whimpered, her voice a lie above a whisper. You were the only one. You were the only one. I know, I said softly, giving her a smile that was all teeth. You were the head of the snake, and I just cut you off. Salvatore and Marco returned just before dawn, their faces ashen, the truth of their betrayal sinking in with every labored step. They had been given an ultimatum by my men at the Wari house: renounce their allegiance to me and face the justice of the family, or join Eleanor in her fate. They had made their choice, but it wasn't the one they thought. They had chosen to try and fight their way out, a desperate, foolish gamble that ended with them bound and gagged in the back of a delivery truck, delivered to my doorstep like unwanted ergo. I had them brought to the main hall of the bunker, the same room where they had plotted my demise just hours earlier. They were on their knees now, stripped of their weapons, their dignity, and any pretense of loyalty. Marco's eyes were wild, derooting around the room as if sea urching for an escape that didn't exist. Salvatore, the muscle, the man who had once broken bones for me without flinching, was sobbing quietly, his massive shoulders heaving with each choked breath. Please, Damian. Marco begged, his voice cracking. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Eleanor, she convinced us. She said you were losing your edge, that the family needed new leadership. We were fools. We were blind. I walked slowly around them, my footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. You are my brothers, I said, my voice low and deadly. You bled with me. You celebrated with me. You stood beside me when the Valentinos tried to take my head. And yet, you were willing to let a child die to get ahead. What was it you thought you'd achieve a smaller piece of a bigger pie? You're so short-sighted. It's pathetic. Salvatore looked up at me, his face streaked with TRS and grime. We didn't want to hurt the boy. That was Eleanor's idea. She said if anyone found out, if the kid talked, it would be over. We just wanted to SCA them, that's all. We never meant. Never meant what? I interrupted, my voice sharp as a blade. Never meant to kill an innocent child, never meant to blow up my home with hundreds of guests inside. You are complicit in every single RT of this conspiracy, and you will are the weight of that guilt for the rest of your miserable lives. I nodded to Enzo, who stepped forward RD with 2 thick files. I opened the first one, revealing photographs, bank statements, and recorded conversations. You thought you were so clever, Marco. You thought you could hide your offshore accounts, your secret meetings with the Valentinos, your little plan to take over my operations in the harbor. But I know everything. I've known for weeks. I was just waiting for you to show your hand. Marco's face went white. You knew all this time, every single detail. I confirmed. I gave you enough rope to hang yourselves, and you took it eagerly. You wanted a new world order. I'm giving it to you. I closed the file and turned to Salvatore. And you, my old friend. You were the muscle, the enforcer. You were supposed to be the loyal one. But loyalty means nothing to you, does it? It's just a word, a convenient lie you tell yourself to justify your greed. Salvatore sobbed harder, his forehead pressing against the cold, concrete floor.
Kill me, he begged.
Just get it over with. I can't live with what I've done. Death would be too merciful, I said, my voice cold as winter steel. I am not a man who breaks his promises. You wanted to take everything from me, and now you will lose everything yourselves. Your fortunes a re-stripped. Your families will be told you died in a CAR accident, a tragic end to two of my most trusted men. You will be shipped to a country where your name and your face a re-worthless, where no one knows who you are or what you once were. You will live, but you will live as nobodies. You will remember every single day that you had it all, and you threw it away for a woman who would have betrayed you to the first chance she got. They were dragged away, their screams echoing in the emptiness of the bunker. It was a fate far worse than death. They would live with the knowledge of their own stupidity, a slow, agonizing punishment that would follow them to their graves. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. They had chosen their path, and now they would walk it alone. I turned to Enzo, who stood silently in the shadows. Bring her in, I ordered. A few moments later, Eleanor was led into the room. She was no longer the elegant, composed woman I had once loved. Her hair was disheveled, her gown torn, her eyes wild with fear and desperation. She had heard the screams, the pleading, the sound of her co-conspirators being dragged away to their fates. She knew what was coming, and it had broken something inside her. Damian, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please. I can explain. I can make this right. Whatever you want, I'll do it. Just don't. Don't what? I asked, stepping closer to her. Don't give you the same mercy you showed Luca, and Maria don't treat you the way you treated me. I reached out and touched her cheek, just as I had done 1,000 times before. She flinched, her body recoiling from my touch. You were my weakness, Eleanor. You were the one person I trusted above all others, and you used that trust to try to destroy me. But I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And survivors don't forgive. They remember. I turned my back on her, a deliberate act of dismissal that cut deeper than any blow. You're going to have a very long time to think about your choices, Ellie. The trial will be a media sensation. Your family's name will be dragged through the mud. I have the evidence. The recordings, the documents, the confessions from your co-conspirators. They will all point to you as the mastermind. And then, after a very public, very humiliating trial, you'll spend the rest of your life in a high-security prison, wearing an orange jumpsuit. You had a dream of power. I'm giving you a night of Marie. As she was led away, her sobs echoing through the corridors, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The betrayal had cut deep, deeper than I had ever imagined possible. But in its wake, something else had been born. A new purpose. A new resolve. The boy, Luca, had shown me that there was still something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting. And I would not fail him.
Not now.
Not ever. The safe house was a modest, unassuming brownstone in a quiet part of Brooklyn, far from the glittering chaos of the Silver Crest Estate. It was the kind of place that blended into the neighborhood, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. I had chosen it myself, years ago, as a bolt hole for emergencies. Never in my wildest nightmare residential had I imagined I would be using it to protect a 3-year-old boy and his mother from the very people I had once called family. When I arrived, Maria was sobbing in the corner of the small living room, her arms wrapped protectively around her son. The television was on, muted, showing footage of the explosion at the estate. The headlines scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Billionaire's estate rocked by explosion. Damian Moretti survives assassination attempt. Fiancé in custody. Maria's eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale with exhaustion and fear. She had been awake for nearly 48 hours, running on adrenaline and terror. But Luca, the little boy, was different. He was standing tall in the center of the room, his chin held high, a small toy soldier clutched in his tiny hand. He wasn't crying. He wasn't hiding. He was standing guard, protecting his mother with the only weapon he had, his courage. When I walked through the door, he looked up at me with those enormous brown eyes, and there was no fear in them. There was only trust. "Mr. Moretti," he said, his voice small but steady. "I kept him safe for you." He held up the toy soldier, a battered little figure with a painted red coat and a chipped plastic bayonet. "He's the captain. I told him not to be red. I told him you would come." Something broke inside me. For years, I had built walls around my heart, convinced that emotion was a weakness, that attachment was a liability. I had buried my humanity so deep that I had almost forgotten it existed. But this child, this tiny, fearless soldier, had found a crack in the air. He had seen me not as the ghost, not as the king of the underworld, but as a protector. As someone worth trusting, I knelt down to his level, my knees pressing against the worn parapet. The king of the underworld, brought to his knees by a 3-year-old boy. "You saved my life, little one," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "And your mama's. You are the bravest person I know. The captain is honored to have such a good soldier looking after him." Luca beamed, a smile so bright it could have lit up the entire city. "I want to be a captain when I grow up," he declared. "A captain like him. I want to protect people." "You will," I promised. "You will be the best captain this world has ever seen." I looked up at Maria, who was watching us with tear-filled eyes. Her sobs had quieted, replaced by a fragile, trembling hope. "Mr. Moretti," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He doesn't understand what happened. The men, the bombs, the things they said they would do to us. He's just a child. He shouldn't have to see this. He doesn't need to understand," I said, rising to my feet. "He just needs to know he's safe. You both are You are under my protection now for as long as you want it." It was a vow, spoken in a language beyond money or power. It was a debt of honor, one that I would repay with every resource at my disposal, and Maria shook her head, a sob escaping her lips. "But why would you do this for us? We're just servants. We're nobody." I looked at her, this woman who had spent years cleaning my home, serving my guests, asking for nothing in return. She had raised a son who had more courage than most of my lieutenants. She had taught him to be kind, to be observant, to trust his instincts. She had given the world a gift, and the world had tried to take it away. "You're not nobody," I said firmly. "You are the mother of the boy who saved my life. You are the woman who raised a hero. And you are under my protection. That means something. It means everything." I gestured to Enzo, who had been standing silently by the door. "Take them to the penthouse. The one on 5th Avenue. I want round-the-clock security, the best we have. No one gets any of them without my explicit authorization." Enzo nodded, his face impassive. "Yes, boss." And Maria Estia route to protest, but I held up a hand. "This is not a negotiation. You are not safe here. The people who did this, they have long memories and longer reach. They will try again, but they will not succeed. Not while I draw breath." Luca tugged on my sleeve, his small fingers insistent. "Mr. Moretti," he said, his voice serious. "Will you come visit us? Will you tell me more stories about the captain?" I looked down at him, this child who had seen the worst of humanity and still believed in the best. I had been so focused on retribution, on crushing my enemies, that I had forgotten what it felt like to be human. But Luca reminded me. He reminded me that there was still something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting. "I will," I said, my voice soft. "I'll come visit you every single day. And I'll tell you all the stories you want. But right now, you need to go with Enzo. You need to be brave for your mama."
"Can you do that for me?"
Luca nodded solemnly, his small chest puffing out with pride. "I can do that. I'm a soldier, just like the captain." As they left, Ria cast one last look over her shoulder, her eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it made my chest ache. I watched them go, the little boy holding his mother's hand, his toy soldier raised high like a banner. In that moment, the plan for ultimate retribution crystallized in my mind. It wouldn't be swift. It wouldn't be merciful. It would be a masterpiece, a slow and terrifying dismantling of everyone who had dared to conspire against me. Every person in Eleanor's web would be made to understand that they hadn't just betrayed a crime boss. They had threatened a child who had reminded me of the meaning of true courage. And for that, there would be no forgiveness. The news of the failed coup, the arrest of my fiancé, the disappearance of key lieutenants, it all sent shockwaves through the underworld like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of fear and confusion spread through every corner of the city's criminal infrastructure. My enemies, the ones who had smelled blood in the water and grown bold in their arrogance, began to circle. The Valentinos, led by the aging and increasingly erratic Don Salvatore Valentino, openly mocked my security failures at a public gathering, toasting to my downfall with expensive champagne. They were blind to the storm that was coming for them. They were fools. But I was patient. I had Leah reneged long ago that vengeance is a dish best served cold, and I intended to serve it at a temperature that would freeze their blood in their veins. The first phase of my retribution began not with a bang, but with a whisper, the exact opposite of how my enemies operated. They expected brute force, a frontal assault, a déclare ration of war. Instead, I gave them silence. And in that silence, I destroyed them. ISTA route by targeting the small banks and shipping companies that Arthur had used to launder their ill-gotten gains. Not with brute force, but with my own FA, our more sophisticated network of hackers and financiers. One by one, their accounts were drained, their assets seized by phantom government agencies, their businesses ruined by a cascade of technical glitches. The Valentinos, without their funds, STA route to turn on one another. The partnership with Eleanor's faction was a shambles, their fully constructed alliance crumbling under the weight of financial ruin. Meanwhile, I let the public narrative do its work. I was the victim, the wronged man, the powerful industrialist whose innocent fiancé had been seduced by the RKARTS of a rival mafia family. A fully planted story in the financial press painted the Valentinos as desperate criminals, willing to destroy anyone for a quick buck. The media ate it up, running headlines that painted me as a tragic hero, a survivor of a devastating betrayal. I looked like a figure of sympathy, a man who had lost everything and was fighting to rebuild. The truth, however, was far more brutal. Marco and Salvatore, the two traitors who had tried to flee, were brought back to me. They were in a Wari house, the same one where they had expected to meet with the Valentinos. It was a perfect circle of poetic justice. I had them bound to chairs in the center of the cavernous space, their faces bruised and bloody from their failed escape attempt. They looked like broken men, shadows of the arrogant lieutenants who had once stood by my side. I walked into the Wari house, flanked by my most loyal men. I didn't need to raise my voice. The silence of the room was far more intimidating than any shout could ever be. The only sounds were the distant drip of water from a leaky pipe and the ragged breathing of the two traitors before me. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You were my brothers. You bled with me. You celebrated with me. And yet, you were willing to let a child die to get ahead. What was it you thought you'd achieve a smaller piece of a bigger pie? You're so short-sighted. It's pathetic." Marco lifted his head, his eyes swollen and bloodshot. "Damian, please." It was Eleanor. She was the one who orchestrated everything. She said she would make us partners, that we would share in the empire. We were weak. We were greedy. But we never wanted to hurt you. Not really. "Not really," I repeated, my voice dripping with contempt. "You were willing to blow up my home with hundreds of innocent people inside. You were willing to murder a 3-year-old boy and his mother. And you stand here and tell me you never wanted to hurt me?" I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed off the walls. You are pathetic. Both of you. Salvatore began to sob, his massive frame shaking with the force of his TRS. Kill me, he begged. Just get it over with. I can't live with what I've done. Death would be too merciful, I said, my voice cold as winter steel. I am not a man who breaks his promises. You wanted a new world order. I'm giving it to you. You're both being exiled. Your fortunes stripped. Your families will be told you died in a CAR accident. You will be shipped to a country where your name and your face worthless. You will live, but you will live as nobodies. You will remember every single day that you had it all, and you threw it away for a woman who would have betrayed you to the first chance she got. They were dragged away, their screams echoing in the emptiness. It was a fate worse than death. They would live with the knowledge of their own stupidity, a slow, agonizing punishment that would follow them to their graves. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. They had chosen their path, and now they would walk it alone. As I walked out of the Wari house, the night air hitting my face like a cold slap, I felt a strange sense of peace. The first phase was complete. The traitors were dealt with, the financial infrastructure of my enemies was in ruins, and the public narrative was firmly in my favor. But the real work was just beginning. The Valentinos were still out there, and Don Salvatore was still breathing. That would change. I had promised retribution, and I intended to deliver. Slowly, painfully, and with absolute precision. Eleanor was kept in a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, not a dungeon. It was my own special brand of torture, a gilded cage that offered every comfort except the one she truly craved. Freedom. She had access to her favorite foods, the finest clothing, the most expensive wines. Her prison was a palace, and that made it all the more unbearable. Every morning, she woke to the sight of the city she had once hoped to rule, a constant reminder of everything she had lost. I visited her on a gray Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrest. She was sitting by the window, dressed in a silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup immaculate. The mask of elegance was back, but it couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes or the tremor in her hands. She was a woman slowly unraveling, and she knew it. "Damian," she said, her voice a brittle whisper. "You've come to gloat. I've come to observe," I corrected, taking a seat across from her. "There's a difference. I want to see the woman who tried to destroy me. I want to see what she's become." She laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "And what do you see?" "I see a woman who had everything and threw it away for nothing," I said flatly. "I see a woman who was so consumed by greed and ambition that she couldn't see the value of what she already had. I see a woman who is going to spend the rest of her life in a federal prison, wearing an orange jumpsuit, eating cafeteria food, and dreaming of the life she could have had." Eleanor's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with TRS, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I had once loved. "Damian, please. You have to understand.
It was never about you.
It was about the Empire. You're so obsessed with power, with control, that you forgot what it means to be human. I wanted to change things. I wanted to make the world better." "You wanted to make the world better by murdering a child?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You wanted to make the world better by blowing up a party full of innocent people. You wanted to make the world better by betraying the one person who loved you." I shook my head slowly. "You are a monster, Eleanor. You just don't have the courage to admit it." She sobbed, her body shaking with the force of her grief. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen like this. It was supposed to be clean. Simple. You were supposed to walk away, retire somewhere and let us take over. The boy, the maid, they weren't supposed to be part of it. Arthur was the one who suggested." "Arthur is dead," I interrupted. "He died in a CAR accident. Or so the papers say. In reality, he died screaming in a basement, begging for mercy he didn't deserve." Eleanor's face went white. "You killed him." "I didn't have to," I said. "He killed himself. He was so terrified of what was coming that he swallowed a bottle of pills. Coway rode to the very end." "But you're not a Coway RD," Ryu. Ellie, you're going to face what's coming. You're going to stand trial, and the whole world is going to see what you really are. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She just sat there, her TRS streaming down her face, her reefily constructed world crumbling around her. I watched her for a long moment, feeling nothing but a cold, empty satisfaction. This was the woman who had tried to take everything from me. This was the woman who had plotted to murder a child. And now she was nothing. Less than nothing. The trial was a media circus, just as I had promised. The courtroom was packed with reporters, photographers, and gawkers, all eager to catch a glimpse of the society heiress who had tried to destroy one of the city's most powerful men. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, recordings, documents, confessions from co-conspirators. The jury was horrified. The public was outraged that I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. I had seen everything I needed to see when I visited her in the penthouse. But I watched the coverage on the news, watching her face crumble as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. Life in federal prison, no possibility of parole. She was led away in handcuffs, her once perfect hair a tangled mess, her eyes hollow and lifeless. The Ice Queen had finally melted. The day after the verdict, I visited her one last time. She was in a holding cell, waiting to be transferred to the federal penitentiary. She looked small and broken, stripped of the elegance and power that had once defined her. "Goodbye, Ellie," I said, my voice soft. "I hope you find some peace in your new life. I hope you think about what you threw away. I hope you think about the boy you tried to kill. And I hope you realize that you did this to yourself." She looked up at me, her eyes empty. "You're a monster," she whispered. "You ruined my life." "No," I said, turning away. "You ruined your own life. I just made sure you faced the consequences." I walked out of the cell and never looked back. Eleanor was no longer my concern. She was a ghost, a faded memory, a warning to anyone who might consider crossing me. The retribution was complete, and it was absolute. But as I stepped out of the courthouse, I realized that something had changed inside me. The anger was gone. The need for vengeance had faded. All that was left was a strange, unexpected emptiness. And a single, burning question. What came next? Don Salvatore Valentino, old and worn down by the relentless dismantling of his empire, was a shadow of his former self. The once proud Don, who had ruled his family with an iron fist for NEARLY 5 decades, had been reduced to a desperate, cornered animal. His businesses were in ruins, his finances drained, his allies scattered like leaves in a hurricane. The partnership with Eleanor's faction had collapsed, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. And in his desperation, he made the mistake that would seal his fate. His latest scheme, a clumsy and reckless gamble, was to kidnap a key business partner of mine, a man named Robert Thornton, who handled my legitimate shipping interests. Robert was a civilian, a good man with a wife and 2 children, who had no idea about the darker side of my empire. He was simply a businessman, and that made him the perfect target. Don Salvatore believed that by holding Robert for ransom, he could force me to the negotiating table to restore some of his lost power and prestige. It was a stupid, short-sighted move, the act of a drowning man reaching for a lifeline that wasn't there. But I had expected it. I had been waiting for it, watching the Don's desperate maneuvers from the shadows. The moment his men grabbed Robert from his golf club on Long Island, I had them followed. They led me to a crumbling mansion on the North Shore, a relic of his family's glory days, now fallen into disrepair. The mansion was a fortress, surrounded by overgrown dens and rusted iron gates, but I was a ghost. I arrived not with a battalion of soldiers, but with a small, elite team of my most trusted operatives. We were shadows in the night, moving through the underbrush with the silence of predators. The mansion was poorly guarded, the Don's resources stretched too thin to maintain proper security. We slipped through the crumbling walls like smoke, neutralizing the few guardians we encountered with swift, silent efficiency. Within 20 minutes, we were inside, navigating the dusty corridors of what had once been a monument to the Valentino family's power. Now it was a tomb, a decaying memorial to a dynasty that was about to end. I found Robert in the basement, tied to a chair, his face bruised and bloodied. He was a mess, but he was alive. His eyes widened with shock and relief when he saw me. "Mr. Moretti," he croaked, his voice hoa RSE from dehydration. "How did you find me?" "I always find my people," I said, cutting through the ropes that bound him. "Now, let's get you out of here." Quietly. We were just about to leave when we heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Don Salvatore was returning to the mansion, accompanied by his remaining men. He had been out, negotiating with what was left of his allies, trying to salvage something from the wreckage of his empire. He walked into the mansion, expecting to find his hostage, and was instead met by my men. The look of dawning horror on Don Salvatore's ancient face was a masterpiece of despair. He was an old man, a relic of a bygone era, and his final gamble had been his undoing. He was dragged into the grand foyer, a space that had seen centuries of his family's history. The chandeliers were caked with dust, the marble floors cracked and stained. It was a fitting backdrop for the end of an empire. I stood before him, my arms crossed, my expression cold and unreadable. "Damian," he wheezed, his face white as a ghost. "This is not what you think. It was a misunderstanding. We would never. Spare me," I said, cutting him off. "I know about your meetings with my former fiancée. I know about the money you laundered for her. You thought we were equals. You were mistaken. You are a dying breed, Don Salvatore. You deal in empty threats and broken promises. I deal in consequences." He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His face was a mask of terror, the mask of a man who had finally realized that his luck had run out.
"Please," he begged.
"My family, my legacy. Spare me, and I'll give you anything, everything." "Your family is already ruined," I said. "Your legacy is already destroyed. There is nothing left for you to give." I gestured to Enzo, who stepped forward with a thick file. "This contains everything. Every transaction, every deal, every dirty secret you've ever tried to hide. I'm going to make sure it all finds its way to the newspapers, the federal prosecutors, and every enemy you've ever made. By the time I'm done, the name Valentino will be a joke, a cautionary tale for anyone who'd a residential to cross Maine." He was left in the mansion, not dead, but helpless. All of his remaining assets were seized. His men were given the choice to serve me or face the same fate. Most of them chose me. His name, his legend, his entire legacy was stripped from him. He was reduced to a pauper, forced to live in the decaying mansion he'd once filled with his opulent parties. The ultimate humiliation was that he would live, knowing the world had moved on without him, and the empire he'd tried to steal had become stronger, more efficient, more terrifying under my rule. As I walked out of the mansion, the night air cool against my face, I felt a strange sense of closure. The Valentinos were no more. Eleanor was in prison. Marco and Salvatore were exiled. The conspiracy was dead, and I had survived. But more than that, I had emerged stronger than ever. The empire was mine, rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. And in its heart, there was a new purpose, a new reason to fight. The boy, Luca, had shown me that there was still something worth protecting. And I would not fail him. Not now. Not ever. The dust had settled. The war was over, and the victory was absolute. I stood on the terrace of the rebuilt Silver Crest Estate, the ghost of that terrible birthday party, a distant memory, faded like an old photograph. The air was clean and crisp, rieing the salt tang of the Atlantic. The sea was calm, a vast expanse of blue stretching to the horizon, and for the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Pieced in my hand, I held a small, hand-painted wooden soldier, a gift from Luca. He had given it to me the last time I visited him, pressing it into my palm with the solemnity of a general bestowing a medal. "You have to keep him safe, Mr. Moretti," he had said, his eyes serious. "He's your captain now. He'll protect you." I smiled at the memory, turning the little figure over in my hand. The The paint was chipped, the edges worn smooth from years of play. It was a simple thing, a child's toy, but to me, it was priceless. It was a reminder of everything I had almost lost and everything I had fought to protect. At the FA, our end of the terrace, Luca was flying a kite with his mother. Ria was laughing, a sound I had only heard a few times in all the years she had worked for me. It was a beautiful sound, full of joy and freedom, a sound that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. She was no longer my housekeeper. I had given her a generous pension and a beautiful apartment in the city, a place where she could raise her son in peace. She had a small bakery now, a cozy little shop in a quiet neighborhood, where she spent her days baking bread and pastries and building a new life for herself and her son. Watching them together, flying that kite against the backdrop of the endless sea, was my new, unexpected sanctuary. Luca spotted me and came running, his small legs pumping furiously. Mr. Moretti, Mr. Moretti, look at the kite. It's so high. It is, little one, I said, smiling down at him. The highest I've ever seen. He grabbed my hand, his small fingers sticky with the suga are from a pastry Ria had brought. I'm going to be a captain when I grow up, he read, his voice filled with absolute certainty. A captain like my soldier. I'm going to protect people. I'm going to keep them safe. I knelt down to his level, my voice soft. You'll be a general, Luca. You have the heart of a lion. You're already a hero. You saved my life, remember? He nodded solemnly. I remember. But that's what heroes do. They save people. I looked at him, this child who had seen so much and remained pure. He had witnessed the worst of humanity, the greed and cruelty that had almost destroyed everything I had built. And yet, he had not been corrupted. He had not been broken. He was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a living reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is still hope. Ria walked over to us, her face flushed with happiness. Mr. Moretti, you spoil him too much. He's going to think this is normal. Maybe it should be, I said, rising to my feet. Maybe this is what normal looks like. A boy flying a kite with his mother. A family laughing together.
Peace.
Ria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have just sent us away, forgotten about us. But you didn't. You gave us a new life. You gave me a new life, I corrected. Your son saved me. He reminded me what it means to be human. That's a debt I can never fully repay. We stood in comfortable silence for a long moment, watching the kite dance against the sky. The wind had picked up, tugging at the string, and Luca was laughing, his small hands gripping the reel with fierce determination. It was a perfect moment, a slice of happiness in a world that had so often been defined by darkness. I'm going to write a book someday, I said, more to myself than to Ria. About all of this. About the boy who saved me and the woman who raised him. About the empire I built and the one I almost destroyed. About the ghosts of the past and the hope of the future. Ria looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise. A book, you, Mr. Moretti. You're not exactly the literary type. I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt strange on my lips. Maybe not. But I think I have a story worth telling. A story about redemption. About second chances. About the power of innocence to change the world. Luca came running back to us, his kite now securely tucked under his arm. Mr. Moretti, will you read me a story tonight, a story about the captain? I looked down at him, this boy who had seen me at my worst and still believed in my best. Of course, little one, I said, my voice soft. I'll read you all the stories you want. I had built an empire on fear, and blood. I had almost destroyed my soul to keep it. But this boy, with his whispered warning, had given me a second chance. The path of retribution was complete, but a new path had just begun. It was a path paved with a promise I had made to myself, to protect the innocent no matter what. And as I watched Luca and Ria walk back toward the house, their laughter echoing in the evening air, I knew that I had finally found something worth fighting for. Something worth protecting. something that made all the darkness worthwhile. 1 year later, I stood at the small graveside of my old self. It was a symbolic gesture, a quiet memorial for the man I used to be. The headstone was plain, perched, a simple slab of gray granite that bore no name, no date, no epitaph. It was a grave for a ghost, a testament to the death of the man who had once ruled through fear, and blood. I had built that man from the ground up, forged him in the fires of betrayal and loss, and I had let him die the moment I realized there was something worth living for. I was no longer just a ghost in the shadows. I had become a guardian. The Moretti Empire had evolved, transformed from a criminal enterprise into a legitimate, if ruthless, corporate machine. The bloodshed was minimal, the overt criminality replaced by a calculated form of what RFA re-waged in boardrooms and courtrooms. We still ran the city, but we did it with a precision that allowed for a semblance of order. It was my city now, my kingdom, but I ruled it differently. The days of fear, and violence were behind me. What remained was something stronger: respect. Luca was the catalyst for all of it. He was the tiny general who had saved my life, and in return, I had saved his. Now, I was determined to give him a future. I had established a foundation in his name, a network of schools and community centers that aimed to give children in the city's darkest corners a chance. It was my form of atonement, a way of paying the debt I owed to the boy who had reminded me what it meant to be human. The foundation bore his name, but it was my legacy, a promise to the future that the darkness of the past would not be repeated. Maria and Luca were a constant presence in my life. They didn't live in the estate, but they were always welcome. I'd spend hours with Luca, teaching him chess, telling him stories of loyalty and honor, the ones that didn't involve bloodshed. He had no idea who I really was, and I intended to keep it that way. To him, I was just Mr. Moretti, the nice man who gave him presents and asked him about his day. He didn't know about the empire I had built, the enemies I had crushed, the betrayals I had survived. He only knew that I was his friend, his protector, his captain. One afternoon, we sat together in the den of the estate, a chessboard between us. Luca was running quickly, his small brow furrowed in concentration as he studied the pieces. He moved his knight, a clumsy but determined gesture, and looked up at me with a triumphant grin. Checkmate. I laughed, genuinely surprised. Well, I'll be. You beat me, little one. That's the first time anyone has beaten me in YRS. Luca beamed, his chest puffing out with pride. I told you I was going to be a general. Generals win battles. Yes, they do, I said, my voice soft. And you, Luca, are going to win many battles. But remember, the most important battles aren't fought with swords or guns. They're fought with kindness, with courage, with the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. He nodded solemnly, his eyes serious. Like you did, Mr. Moretti. You stood up for me and my mama. You fought the bad guys. You're the bravest person I know. I felt a lump form in my throat, a strange and unfamiliar sensation. This child, this tiny, fearless soldier, saw me not as the ghost, not as the king of the underworld, but as a hero. And in his eyes, I saw the man I had always wanted to be, the man I was finally becoming. The world was a dangerous place, but I had learned that the greatest weapon wasn't a gun or a bomb. It was information and the loyalty of a few good people. The little boy, with his innocent whisper, had not only saved my life, he had saved my soul. The ending I had read, dying alone, betrayed by those I trusted, was avoided. I had a new family. It wasn't a family of blood, but a family of choice. And I was determined to protect them with the same ruthless efficiency I had once used to destroy my enemies. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the den, I looked at Luca and Maria, the two people who had changed everything. They were laughing together, their joy infectious, their presence a balm to my weary soul. I had spent so many years building walls, protecting myself from the world, that I had forgotten what it felt like to let people in. but they had broken through those walls. They had shown me that there was still something worth fighting for. Something worth living for, and I walked over to them, the wooden soldier still clutched in my hand. "Luca," I said, kneeling down beside him. "I want you to have this. It's your captain. He belongs with you." Luca looked at me, his eyes wide with surprise. "But Mr. Moretti, he's your captain. He protects you." "He does," I said, pressing the little figure into his palm. "But he's going to protect you now. Because you little one are my legacy. You are the future. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that future is bright." The ghost was no longer just a specter of Fia. He was a protector. The empire was no longer a monument to my power, but a fortress for those who deserved my loyalty. And the story of the little boy who saw the truth was no longer a secret. It was a legend. It was a lesson that even in the darkest of empires, a whisper of innocence can change the world. The RS passed and the city changed. The old Gua-RD faded into memory, their empires crumbling into dust, their names whispered only in cautionary tales. The Moretti Empire evolved, becoming something greater than I had ever imagined. We were no longer just players in the underworld. We were shapers of the world itself. Legitimate businesses flourished, communities thrived, and the foundation that bore Luca's name became a beacon of hope for countless children. The darkness that had once defined my life receded, replaced by something I had never dared to believe in: redemption. Luca grew, as children do, from a tiny soldier into a young man of principle and purpose. He never forgot the lessons I taught him, the stories of honor and loyalty, the importance of standing up for what was right. He didn't know the full truth about my past, and I intended to keep it that way. To him, I was simply the man who had saved him and his mother, the man who had given them a second chance. It was enough. It was more than enough. I watched him graduate from college, his face beaming with pride as he accepted his diploma. He had chosen to study law, driven by a desire to fight for justice, to protect the innocent. I sat in the audience, my heart swelling with a pride I had never known. This was my legacy. Not the empire, not the wealth, not the Fia I had once inspired. It was this boy, this man, who had grown from a frightened child into a force for good. After the ceremony, he found me in the crowd, his eyes shining. "Mr. Moretti," he said, embracing me, "I did it. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to help people, just like you helped me." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "You're going to do great things, Luca. I've always known that. You have the heart of a lion." He laughed, the same joyful laugh I had heard so many years ago in the Garden. "You taught me that. You taught me everything. Courage, loyalty, the importance of standing up for what's right. You're my hero, Mr. Moretti. You always have been." I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him about the darkness I had left behind, the blood on my hands, the ghosts that still haunted my dreams. That was not the man he knew. That was not the man I wanted him to know. Instead, I pulled him into another embrace, holding him tightly, feeling the warmth of his gratitude and the hope of his future. The ghost was no more. In his place stood a man who had found redemption, a man who had learned that true power lies not in fear, but in love. The empire I had built was no longer a monument to my own ambition. It was a fortress for those who deserved protection, a sanctuary for the innocent. And the story of the little boy who had whispered a warning in the midst of chaos became a legend, a testament to the power of innocence to change the world. I walked away from the graduation ceremony, the evening sun casting long shadows across the campus. Luca and Maria were behind me, their laughter echoing in the air, a sound that had become the soundtrack of my new life. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was ready for it. I had found my purpose. I had found my family. And I had found, at long last, the peace I had spent my entire life searching for.